Okay, you guys are going to get to see a little bit of what we did this week. We have three short skits for you. These skits require audience participation, so I really need you guys to get into it, but I need you to kind of be quiet after you do your part, otherwise it will never get finished. I think in the first and second ones, you are going to be the ocean, so listen for your cue to come in. And the first skit we're going to do is called the Sea Splits. The Israelite people were sick and tired of being servants to the Egyptians, and they wanted to go back to their own country. When God chose Moses to lead Israel out of Egypt, Moses was very confused. He felt like an inadequate leader, so he decided to work on his skills. First, he tried rubbing his stomach and patting his head at the same time. Then he tried doing that while standing on one leg. Finally, he tried doing it with his eyes closed while hopping on one leg. He could not do it and fell miserably to the ground. Moses felt like a failure and walked in small circles with his hands in the air, looking at the sky, shouting, "Why me, Lord?
Why me, Lord?"
He continued to do this.
Why me?
Until he tripped and fell over a staff of wood on the ground. Moses jumped up and kicked the wooden staff. The staff jumped up and said, "Hey, it's not my fault you tripped."
Hey, not my fault you tripped.
Extremely surprised by a talking piece of wood, Moses jumped back. Not ready to argue with the bossy little fellow, he picked up the staff, threw it over his shoulder, and said to the Israelites, "Let's go, we're out of here."
Let's go, we're out of here.
When the Israelites left Egypt, Pharaoh came running onto the scene, searching for Moses and the escaped Israelites. Pharaoh squinted his eyes as he looked from east to west. While he continued to search for Moses and company, his soldiers arrived riding shiny new chariots. Upon their arrival, Pharaoh beat his chest and let out an earth-shattering war cry.
Ah!
He began shouting out orders to his men. March, 1, 2, 3.
March, 1,
Watch out.
2, 3. March, 1, 2, 3.
His army marched toward the fleeing Israelites. The Israelites looked back and saw Pharaoh's army rapidly approaching them. They shook with fear and gnashed their teeth. Pharaoh's army shouted nasty things about the Israelites' sense of fashion and personal hygiene.
I hate those shoes. I see better clothes at a flea market. Seriously.
One Israelite began to panic and screamed at Moses, "Weren't there enough graves in Egypt?"
Weren't there enough graves in Egypt?
Moses looked puzzled by the question since he had never counted the graves in Egypt. Another Israelite shouted, "We'd rather be slaves to the Egyptians than die today."
We'd rather be slaves to the Egyptians than die today.
Out of frustration, Moses hit his staff on the ground repeatedly. Attempting to bring order to the chaos, he slapped his staff repeatedly. Once he had the Israelites' full attention and the staffs, he said to everyone, "Do not be afraid.
Do not be afraid.
The Lord will come to our rescue."
The Lord will come to our rescue.
He was so confident of this message that he repeated it again, this time backwards.
Rescue arms come for the Lord thee.
Moses then did as the Lord instructed. He walked out to the water's edge and he raised his staff above his head. The mighty waters quickly divided into two sides. All right, audience, this is where I need you guys to stand up and make the waters. Hold hands across the aisle. Okay, and now the water parts into two sides. The Israelites walked through the parted water on dry land. I need the water to be very quiet. And go ahead and have a seat. Meanwhile, Pharaoh's soldiers and chariots, still yelling their war cries, chased the escaped Israelites into the parted sea. But in the middle of the sea, their new chariots broke down and all the soldiers fell to the ground. The mighty soldiers lay on the sea's floor and cried like little babies. Some even sucked their thumbs. Moses and all of Israel made it through the dry land of the divided waters. When Moses raised his staff above his head, the parted water filled the sea again, covering the crying men of Pharaoh's army. Audience, cover this.